Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining. All 439 and growing. Obviously, this conversation has generated a lot of interest, and I can understand why. I had hoped that this year, 2021, would be marked by more productivity in Washington and less drama than my first 2 years in Congress. And I'm still convinced we're going to be more productive. I'm really looking forward to the swearing in of a new president, the start of the new Senate majority that was just elected after the Senate races in Georgia. I really think there's a lot of practical stuff that we can get done that's going to be great for New Jersey and great for the country. But the drama, I'm afraid, is not going away. I've been warning, as many of you know, since before I was elected, about the growing extremism in this country. It exists on the right and the left, but on the right, and this is the professional view of everybody in law enforcement, everyone in the intelligence community I speak to, it is a particularly virulent threat right now, in part because the delusions of these right-wing extremists are being validated and legitimized by the President of the United States and other leaders in this country. So behavior that to most of us under normal circumstances would seem completely deviant, like trying to storm the United States Capitol, to a lot of these people has come to be seen as normal. I'm perfectly fine. I know people have expressed concerns about me personally. I was in the House chamber when all this went down on Wednesday. It was a tense moment, but members who were there all managed to get out safely, fortunately, the staff as well. We did lose two, actually, members of our very brave Capitol Police Force. One was beaten to death by the mob, and the other took his own life, because so many of these wonderful officers feel a sense of responsibility for what happened, even though individually they behaved marvelously. There's absolutely no question what happened here. This was several groups of people who came to Washington, having telegraphed for weeks what their intention was. They intended to use violence to intimidate members of Congress to hand the election to Donald Trump, because they believed, based on what their leaders have been telling them, that Trump won the election. And they were particularly there to target Republicans. This is an important thing to remember. Trump, in his speech to the rally, other people in their speeches to that rally before they marched to seize the Capitol, basically said, the Democrats are hopeless, but it's the Republican traitors that you need to go and put pressure on. And so they marched. Many of you saw one of their chants was "Hang Mike Pence," because Vice President Pence, after loyally supporting this administration for 4 years, decided that he was going to read the script that the Constitution and the laws of the United States provided for him. He was not going to break the law. They proceeded to overwhelm a Capitol Police Force that had not been well led and that was not prepared for something they should have been prepared for. And the result was the violence and mayhem and shame that we experienced on Wednesday. But it's also really, really important to stress that all of us, apart from the totally crazy members of my caucus, were absolutely determined as we waited this siege out, that the moment it was safe, the moment they literally wiped the blood off of the floor outside of the House chamber, we were going to march back in there and we were going to finish our job. We were going to certify this election, because the last thing we want to do is to let thugs and terrorists intimidate any institution of the US government, much less the United States Congress. And that's what we did. The Democrats were united there. Mitch McConnell was totally united with us in doing that, and we did it. Right now, we are preparing for the inauguration of a new president. These violent extremists are still out there. So this is an ongoing threat. This is an ongoing attack, but we are ready for this. They're not ready. We are ready. They're not ready for what's going to be unleashed now that the United States government is going to be united. Our law enforcement agencies have woken up to the nature of this threat. We are going to secure the Capitol. We're going to secure this country, and we are going to go ahead with the people's business, the business that the people of this United States voted for us to carry out in November. And in the meantime, as you all know, we're also having a very serious, somber conversation about accountability, because this is a line that you can't cross. We have a president of the United States who explicitly encouraged a mob to attack the United States Capitol to prevent Congress from doing its job. In my opinion, if that's not an impeachable offense, there is no reason to have an impeachment clause in the United States Constitution.
Tom, that's a lie. That's
only president for another few days. The danger continues. We've been briefed by the Capitol Police, by the FBI, on very serious ongoing threats to the lives of members of Congress by these people who came and are promising to come back. And it is absolutely imperative that we have a united leadership in this country that is uniting around the principle that that cannot happen again, and that anybody who crosses that line in the future is going to be held accountable. So I'm sure we're going to talk about all of that. I know you guys have a lot of questions, and I'll do my best as always to try to answer. But bottom line, this was bad, but we are okay, and I have absolute confidence that that we are going to put this ugliness behind us, and that the overwhelming majority of the American people, Republicans, Democrats, liberals, conservatives, whatever we may disagree on, we are going to absolutely agree on the rule of law. So with that, let me turn it back to you guys to send some questions my way. Thanks again.
Thanks, Tom. Our first questioner is going to be Jennifer from Washington Township. Jennifer, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Hi, Jennifer.
Hi, I am so glad first that you and your colleagues are okay, because it could have been so much worse. Bad as it was, it could have been a true bloodbath. And related to that, my question is, why the DC mayor's request for the National Guard and additional security was ignored? It needn't have gotten as far as it got. I mean, we're lucky it didn't go further.
Yeah. So look, a lot of these security questions, I'm going to be cautious in my answers because we don't know yet.
Right.
I don't want to blame anybody unfairly. And we're going to, obviously, we've already begun to investigate what happened and why, keeping in mind that we need the Capitol Police and the National Guard and DOD and the Secret Service to focus first and foremost on the challenge of the next 2 weeks, right? But you know, we're going to figure that out. And you know, what is clear is that there was a general failure within the law enforcement community, and you know, including DOD and the leadership of the National Guard, but beginning with, unfortunately, the Capitol Police, to understand the nature of the threat that we were facing. I think they put January 6th in the category of a protest, a demonstration. These were going to be protesters. The DOD referred to it as a First Amendment activity. They now realize, beyond a shadow of a doubt, we're not dealing with protesters, we're dealing with violent extremists who came absolutely determined to find and do violence to people, who thought the police would be on their side, and then when they saw the police was not on their side, did violence to police officers as well. So that's now clear, and we are treating the next couple of weeks very, very differently. I'm quite confident that you know, this is not going to be repeated around the inauguration.
And you really feel confident that the inauguration will be safe?
Well, you can never be certain about anything.
Right.
Okay. And anybody after January 6th who says, don't worry, we got this covered, that would not give me confidence. What gives me confidence is that the security officials I've spoken to are very, very somber and serious when they describe the threat. And I think the plan they have in place, the fencing that's gone up, the national thousands of guardsmen and women who are present, the new access rules, all of that, had that been in place on January 6th, a fly could not have penetrated the Capitol complex. So I'm not so worried about a million MAGAs rushing a fence right now, but there are other things I am concerned about, and we're very much on top of them over the next few days to make sure that nothing goes wrong.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you both. All right, our next questioner is Laura V. That's V as in Victor. Laura, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so I just wanted to know whether it's possible to legally prohibit Trump from holding rallies.
No. Let me back up here, because I think this general theme is probably going to come up a lot this afternoon in our conversation. I'm very angry right now. My colleagues are very angry. And I think there is a lot of righteous anger among Americans about what happened. And that's okay. But as we explore the measures that we are going to have to take to protect the security of our government and of our country and of our people, we do have to keep some perspective and not just do things out of anger. We have to think about the precedents that we are setting. I am still somebody who believes in the First Amendment and the Constitution and the liberties that make this country the great country that it has been. And I strongly believe that we can protect ourselves without running roughshod over them. So the president has every right to speak his mind.
I look at it more as like the same way you put a restraining order on somebody. He's
Yeah.
proven time and again that he can't be trusted to not yell fire in a crowded theater.
Well, so here's how we approach that. Number one, we have private companies like Twitter and Facebook. There's a lot of people screaming censorship, but it seems to be that what they are really saying is that the United States government should be able to force private companies to give terrorists and extremists a platform. Obviously, the government can't do that. Private companies can give a platform to whoever they want to give a platform to. And right now, the president has been basically denied access to social media. I feel the difference just over the last 2 days. This is not a threat to his free speech. He can give a speech anytime he wants. He can call a press conference. Yes, he can call a rally. I would not want to stop him from doing that. As long as you hold rallies consistent with local laws and permitting and all of that, I would not treat him any differently. He's not above or beneath the law. Now, there is a legal question that has to be asked about him and some other leaders. Did they cross the line from protected free speech to incitement of violence? And, my strong philosophy is that as an elected official, that is not my judgment to make. That is a legal question. All I will say is that he is neither above nor below the law. And I would expect the Justice Department, as it looks at the full range of events that led up to January 6th, to be raising serious questions about that. But that is up to them, not up to me.
Thank you both. Just a reminder that when you're submitting your questions, please include your where you are from, your town name. We have a lot of people on this call with similar names, and just to make sure we're calling on the correct person, please include your town name. And with that, our next questioner is Nick from Flemington. Nick, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes. Hi, Nick.
Hello, Congressman Malinowski. I'm glad you and your colleagues are all okay. My question is, there's a lot of talk about new domestic terrorism legislation, and I have concerns about future presidents abusing such a law to suppress legitimate peaceful protesting. How would you approach any new terrorism legislation to address legitimate concerns of groups that cause violence, such as January 6th, and prevent abuses of a future authoritarian president, such as like a Trump 2.0, if you will?
Sure. I share that concern, Nick. So my answer is I would approach domestic terrorism legislation very cautiously. I think we do need a very hard look at our national strategy for protecting Americans against domestic homegrown extremism and terrorism. I've been talking about this, as many of you know, for a couple of years. I'm not saying there's no need for additional legislation. I'm just saying we don't rush to it. We don't do something just out of anger, out of the passion of the moment, because everything we do today sets a precedent for future presidents dealing with, like, it could be a Republican president, could be a Democratic president, it could be a completely different threat 10 or 20 years from now. And we want to make sure that we're not just doing what feels good in this moment. Mm-hmm. My starting assumption is that our law enforcement agencies have authorities and resources that they have not fully brought to bear. And so I think we need to make sure that they bring those authorities and resources to bear. Then, we can have a conversation about whether there are other authorities that they may need. Like I'm interested, for example, in whether we ought to make it easier for victims of these crimes to sue domestic extremist groups. Civil lawsuits, which I think can be a very effective way of breaking mafia-like organizations. And these guys, let's face it, they don't have a lot of money. So that's something, it's a question I have, but we're going to explore that, I think, very, very carefully. The important thing is it's got to be a priority for all of our law enforcement and intelligence agencies, and I believe it will be going forward.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Our next questioner is Susan from Milburn. Susan, can you hear us?
Yes, yes. Hi, Tom.
Hi, Susan.
Hi, I'm glad to hear that you're all right. My question is the status of the members of Congress, such as Pramila Jayapal and Bonnie Watson-Coleman, who were infected by the non-mask wearing members of Congress with whom they were sheltering. Are there any more members of Congress that have come down with the coronavirus? And also, I guess, as a side note, about the level of vaccination of the members of Congress, because I'm wondering, it's none of my business, it's a private health matter, but I'm wondering if there's an issue where the Republican members of Congress aren't getting vaccinated.
Oh, they're
not wearing masks and they're not being vaccinated.
Yeah, everyone's getting vaccinated.
Okay.
When it comes to protecting themselves, they're pretty. Most members of Congress are pretty much on the same side. When it comes to protecting others, there's a little bit of a division. There was, after we evacuated the House chamber, many of us spent the afternoon in a hearing room in one of the House office buildings. And there was what I refer to as the QAnon caucus, not Republicans. Let's be fair here. Most Republicans are very responsible about this. But there is a small number of people in that caucus who are trying to use polite language. So maybe I won't even characterize them, but they are, they are among the people who helped to encourage, in my view, this whole Stop the Steal movement and the march on and seizure of the Capitol. And some of them are QAnon supporters, absolutely, openly. And there was a group of them that was sitting in the back of that room not wearing masks, despite being asked to do so repeatedly. And since then, we've had several members test positive. I can't be certain that it was because of that, but it's certainly a fair assumption. Bonnie Watson Coleman, my neighbor just to the south of our district, who is a very dear friend and a cancer survivor, somebody who is more vulnerable, I think, than others, tested positive. I was very happy to see this morning that she's doing okay. She was in the hospital briefly, but went home. So my thoughts are with her, but I'm hearing good things. I got a test this morning. I'm feeling fine, but just as a precaution, I wanted to make sure that I got tested. So that's that.
Could I just ask, is it accurate or that one of these QAnon men, I don't know if it was a QAnon member or sympathizer, but one of the members of Congress actively assisted the insurrectionists in finding their way to Nancy Pelosi's office?
No,
is that accurate?
I've not seen any evidence of that. Look, there's a lot of stuff flying around.
Yes, I know.
I do think there are some things that need to be investigated. As you guys may know, I have introduced a resolution to censure a member of Congress, Representative Mo Brooks of Alabama, who stood in front of this mob at the White House and told them to, again, after denouncing his fellow Republicans, he told them to march to Capitol Hill to take down names and kick ass. And that's obvious incitement, and I think he should be censured by his colleagues. But actual collusion with the rioters, I do not have hard evidence of that. I think there's enough out there that the ethics committee of the House should, and I believe will, look into that, but until we have hard evidence, we need to be very cautious about making those accusations.
And just one final, I know I'm taking up too much time. Is there any, is it, I guess everything's possible, but is it possible that Donald Trump will pardon some of these people? And I'm just concerned about the pardons in general, but I know I've taken up too much time.
I don't know what Donald Trump's going to do. It would be outrageous. He only has a few days. But, if he pardons a bunch of people who beat a police officer to death, then I think history will damn him for that, probably more than anything else he's done.
Thank you, Susan. And thank you, Tom. Our questioner comes from Basking Ridge, Maryland. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can. I had a concern that one of two scenarios with getting rid of Trump would be either the House would impeach him and then Senate get bogged down and get energy taken away from Biden's agenda, or he would resign, Pence would take over, do a Nixon, and then Pence would pardon him. And I read an intriguing article this morning in the Washington Post about using a procedure that they enacted right after the Civil War. It's called Amendment 14, Article 3, which by a simple majority says that if Congress says that a person has been involved in insurrection, that they can never run for political office again, unless there's like a 2/3 majority or something agree. So seems like that would be a simpler way of going, because I don't want more Trump drama into the new administration.
Yeah. So on the first concern, and these are all valid questions. Impeachment normally does take a lot of time and energy. I would argue in this case that it would not, because it's so simple. I think you could prosecute that case in the Senate in about half an hour. I mean, you could present the evidence for the one count of impeachment that we will be considering. You show the videotape of his speech and some of the tweets, and we all know what happened in the Capitol. We know who these people were. I think you just put that forward, and then it's a simple choice for senators. Do you think that that rises to a level where you convict this person or not? Yes or no? But I don't think, unlike the Ukraine trial and others in the past, the facts are not complicated. There's no dispute about the facts. It's just a question of what your judgment is. So I don't think it would take away from the absolutely essential and urgent things that the new president will need to be doing with the Senate and with the House in his first few weeks to crush the coronavirus epidemic, to get the economy going again. That's all of us want to spend 98% of our time on that, and I don't think this prevents that. The 14th Amendment provision is a really interesting one, and we are looking at that. Insurrection is a very strong word. And the 14th Amendment was passed in reaction to a civil war in which hundreds of thousands of Americans died fighting each other. What happened on January 6th was really bad, but it was not that. I could be convinced, I think, that it was an act of insurrection. It was certainly a violent attack. This is what I keep stressing, a violent attack on the United States Capitol to prevent Congress from executing the laws of this country. And if you look at the federal sedition statute, that's basically how sedition is defined. So I think it's a case that can be made. Like everything, I think we need to do it thoughtfully and see if we can get bipartisan support, which I think we'll have at least some of for impeachment tomorrow if we go there, and proceed. My bottom line is there has to be some accountability. It could be that, it could be impeachment, but it's got to be something real.
Thank you both. Just a reminder, if you do have a question you would like to ask Tom live, please first ask it in the chat feature at the bottom of your screen. I see a few people have their hands raised. Please ask your question using the chat feature and include what town you are from as well. Our next questioner is Michael from Califon. Michael, can you hear us?
You guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Good afternoon, Tom. Happy you guys are all safe and gotten back to normal a little bit. I had really two questions. The first was really, how do you think we can heal the country and start to bring people together when something like 40% of the population of the country seems to live in a parallel universe, that we don't agree on the same facts, we don't interpret reality the same way. So how can we have a discussion about moving forward together? And my second question really was, what do we say to people who, myself and my daughters included, went out marching this summer for social justice and how so many people involved in that movement were treated by law enforcement compared to people at the Capitol last week who were met with very light security. And we all knew for weeks that something might happen as it was broadcast across several social media platforms. My heart goes out to folks that really demonstrated peacefully for social justice. And I saw how some of my friends included in New York were treated by police there compared to folks that were really just running amok in our Capitol last week. So anyway, thank you.
On your second point, that didn't escape anybody's attention. I don't think race and culture can explain all of this. I think a big factor is that the Capitol Police and law enforcement in general just hasn't caught up to the severity of this threat from these domestic extremist organizations. And perhaps because virtually all of these people are white, there is a kind of subconscious identification, like they can't be that bad. But then again, there were plenty of white protesters this summer who got treated in ways that were very concerning to a lot of us. So I think it's a combination of factors, and that's certainly one, and one reason why we've come down really, really hard on our Capitol Police. The chief was asked to resign, and he did. The sergeant of arms, to whom the chief reported, also resigned. We have new leadership, and I'm confident that the vast majority of people on that force they don't want to lose the Capitol to a mob. The way they feel right now it's really, really awful. And then on your first question, look, that's the biggest and hardest question, and I don't have a brilliant answer for you that no one has ever thought of. I will say that unity, there can't be unity with impunity. A lot of the appeals to unity right now are coming from people who themselves have never hesitated to introduce poison into our national conversation. Now that they're on the defensive and feeling a little bit guilty, they're appealing to unity and moving on as a way of shielding themselves, not as a way of actually healing this country. So I think we have to begin by asking what are we uniting around, and what are we uniting against? And we don't have to unite around being Democrats or Republicans or liberals or conservatives. That's totally fine. But we do need to unite around respect for law and order and the rule of law and the Constitution and free and fair elections and telling the truth. So that's my starting point. And there are some people with whom it would be very difficult for me to have a conversation, because they are absolutely convinced that they are on the side of the law. They are on the side of election integrity. They're on the side of liberty and freedom. They've been convinced by their leaders and by the social media echo chamber in which they live. They think I'm crazy, and I think they're crazy. But I do think, we begin with the overwhelming majority of Americans being disgusted by what happened. If it's 70%, I'll take that right now. I saw Trump's approval ratings down to 30%, so that tells you something. And then one of the things that we're going to have to reckon with, and this has been a project of mine for some time, is that social media echo chamber. That is the next project that I'm going to try to lead my fellow members of the House to take on. And it's not just about whether they allow Donald Trump personally a platform. In a way, that's kind of an easy way out for Facebook and Twitter, just to ban Trump after all this has happened. What they've got to address is the design of these social networks. They are designed to tear us apart, to polarize us. They are designed, that Facebook isn't liberal or conservative, it's not Republican or Democrat, but it knows what you are. And it will feed you more and more extreme and biased versions of whatever you already believe, until you're driven further and further in the direction you're already inclined to go. And that has absolutely got to change. And if they don't do it voluntarily, we're just going to have to regulate them to death, because I'm fed up. And I think a lot of my colleagues now are onto this, thanks to what just happened. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Our next questioner is Susan from Milford. Susan, can you hear us?
Yes. I asked two questions. I think, Tom, you answered the first about the safety at the inauguration. And then I'm reading a lot of tweets from members of Congress who are now testing positive after being locked down with members of Congress who refuse to wear a mask. I'm wondering if there's any mechanism at all to hold these members of Congress accountable for not wearing a mask. Can they be censured? Can they be removed from committee posts? This really needs to stop.
Yeah, I think the answer is yes. We can't go do it retrospectively.
Yeah.
But the rule, we do have a rule. Everybody's supposed to wear a mask in the Capitol complex. It just hasn't been enforced very strongly with these members of Congress. Like, you know, there's a wonderful lady who works on the floor of the U.S. House, and if I forget to wear my tie, she comes up to me and very sternly tells me that I'm breaking the dress code, and then I have to follow her to the bad boys closet, where she takes out some ugly looking tie that I have to wear. But you know, I'm obedient. I try to obey the rules, and like that nice lady cannot make Louis Gohmert or you know, Congresswoman Boebert, you know, who's bragging about packing a firearm on the floor of the House to, you know, if they say no, go to hell. Like, what can that person do? And we can't prevent them from exercising their responsibilities as members of the House, short of expulsion, because the Constitution says they were elected. They have to be allowed to be on the floor and to participate in debate and to vote. So I think the solution is applying specific sanctions within the House rules. I just signed on to a proposal to fine members $1,000 a day if they don't abide by this rule. I believe that that's something we can do. Obviously, yes, you can censure members, and I would support that if there's a consistent pattern. But I think we've been a little bit, well, I'm certain we've been too lax in enforcing this rule.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Our next questioner is Catherine from Reddington. Catherine, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you for doing this, Congressman, and I'm glad you're safe and your staff, and it had to be scary for your family. I hope they're doing okay. My question is, can you speak to, forgive me, I had to take a phone call for about 10 minutes, so I hope no one asked this. Could you speak to security efforts in Trenton? I understand that there may be armed attacks in state capitals and perhaps elsewhere in New Jersey. Yeah.
So I can't speak to it in any detail because I've just been focused on what's happening in the United States Capitol. I am a little bit more worried actually about the state capitals in general right now than I am about the U.S. Capitol. You know, we've got National Guard, we've got Secret Service now in charge of all of the security preparations before the inauguration. And there have been some very, very significant measures taken just in the last few days. We have 50 state capitals. And I don't know how well Wyoming is doing and Michigan is doing and Arkansas is doing. We've got good vigilant folks in New Jersey, our attorney general, our state police. They have no illusions about the nature of this threat. But I can't, I'm just not in a position right now to be able to tell you exactly what they're doing.
Really long-winded answer.
Well, he just wanted to name the.
So, but it's a concern. Look, this is going to be with us for some time. But I am happy we're playing offense, and this is important to me. I've seen these big 8-foot fences go up around the entire Capitol complex, and we need it, unfortunately, but I hate it. This place should be open. We should not
go to work 8 to 12 tonight.
Hi, everybody. Please mute yourself if you're talking to someone else. So as I was saying, I don't like these fences. It's playing defense. What I do like is the sight of FBI and police fanning out across the country, finding the people who were in the Capitol complex on January 6th, and in some cases arresting them. Personally, anybody who was in that building, if we can identify them from their cell phone pings, they were at the very least committing trespassing, and I think should be prosecuted. I like that there's a discussion about no-fly lists right now for people who were in that building, at least temporarily, prior to the inauguration. I want to see the FBI empowered without having to, make excuses to the president and his staff to infiltrate these extremist organizations, as they've successfully done with other terrorist groups, the Klan in the past. So we can take the fight to them, prevent these things from happening before they happen. That's what's going to protect all 50 state capitals. And these guys are very dangerous, but they're not that intelligent. They're actually not that capable. At the end of the day, American democracy should not be cowering.
That is very rude to call.
Let me finish, and I'm happy to take that question. I'm thinking about, the guy sitting in the Senate chair with his horns and his body paint. Like, American democracy is not going to bend or cower before somebody like that. If we are prepared, if we use the resources and authorities we have, like those people have a lot more to fear from us than we do of them.
Thank you both for that question. And as Tom stated, just a reminder to keep muted at all times. We are trying to deal with background noise, and we want everyone to be able to ask their question. So please keep yourself muted for no interruptions. Our next questioner is Emily from Washington Township. Emily, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Thank you. And thank you again for the time you're allotting to us today for this. I teach AP Government 11th grade students. We were actually watching the events unfold last week. We were watching the certification results, the speeches on the floor. I had 2 students in class. We're all at home again now. And I had the rest, similar to what we're doing now, Zooming in and chatting, and, different students watching different news channels. We were sort of all sharing things. Since then, there's been a few concerns from the perspective of 11th grade students. We are right now covering the interaction between branches of government. So they were trying to look for examples of how are these branches interacting right now. Their biggest concern was the disparity they saw concerning race, which I know you addressed a little bit, but also these are students who will be voting within a year. So they had to go to their next class today. But if you had anything you would say to 16, 17-year-olds about what they saw and how they're feeling, what can I give back to them tomorrow when we meet again?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for being an AP government teacher. One of the things that we need is, going forward, this is not a solution in the next 2 weeks, but we need to talk about the importance of civics education and history and government education in this country in the same way that we talk about STEM. And that's also something that I intend to work on over the next couple of years, because there are things Congress can do. Even though most public education is local, there are things Congress can do to encourage it. I'd be happy to come speak to your students at some point if you wanted to organize that on Zoom. I've done that quite a bit. It's like there's nothing that I find more interesting and fun than talking to kids that age who are studying government. I sometimes feel like all this drama that we've had the last couple of years was staged to make your class more interesting. So they're getting an education right now that requires them to consider the foundations of our system of government, what the rules are, why we have these rules, stuff that we were taking for granted, which they are now realizing, and I hope you're imparting this, can't be taken for granted. We are the country we choose to be. We will have the rules that we choose to enforce, and it's on us. But at the same time, if I were speaking to them, I would also reassure them that this imperfect but still marvelous system that we've had for over 200 years, it held through this period. We had a president and a group of people who didn't want to accept the outcome of an election. And they tried their very best to persuade members of their party around the country to help them avoid the verdict of the people. And invariably, in state legislatures across the country, in local and county governments, local election boards, public officials all did their duty. Many of them were members of President Trump's party. Many of them voted for President Trump, strongly supported him. But when it came time to count the votes, they counted the votes and they followed the law. And when they came under tremendous pressure, including in some cases death threats, to find a few thousand extra votes in Georgia to recalculate, as the president urged.
That's a misconception, and
they said no. And then when it went to court, which is the president's right to challenge anything that he thought was irregular in court, every single court looked at the facts and said no, including judges who had been recently appointed by President Trump. There are very few countries around the world where that could happen, where public officials still almost invariably do their job and follow the law, even if the leader of their own political party is telling them not to. And that held all the way through last Wednesday. And yes, there were members of the president's party who voted against their constitutional duty not to certify the election. But in the Senate, the vote was 94-6. So virtually every strong Trump supporter in the Senate said, no, it is our duty to certify, as much as we don't like it, that Joe Biden won. In the House, there was a larger group of people, some of whom told us because they were afraid for their lives, who voted not to certify. But still, we marched back into that room, even after this attack, and we finished our job, certified the election. President-elect Biden will be sworn in, and our democracy continues. Our institutions have held. So I hope, I hope as they learn from this drama, which is really interesting, that they come to that conclusion. it'll be up to them to come to it, obviously, but I hope that they do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Our next question comes from Gordon from Westfield. Gordon, can you hear us? Gordon, are you available right now? If not, we will move right along. Our next question comes from Rick P. That's P as in Peter. Can you hear us?
I'm sorry, Audrey. Gordon Vickers here.
Okay. Thanks, Gordon.
Yeah, I had a little challenge unmuting there. I was using the wrong icon. Quick question for Tom. I was curious as to why you're pursuing censure for Representative Mo Brooks as opposed to expulsion, which I know is an option, and was something that was used in the past in what I see as some similar circumstances back in the 1860s.
Sure. So I've introduced a censure resolution which would have the effect, if we adopt it, of that representative, Mo Brooks, being forced to stand in the well of the House as the resolution condemning him is read. It's a scarlet letter. It's a mark of shame. I believe a lot of his Republican colleagues would vote for it. And I believe it's a first step. It's something that we can do with the facts that we already have very easily and very quickly. At the same time, I also believe that our ethics committee needs to take a deeper look at the role that Congressman Brooks and several other members might have played in encouraging and perhaps even colluding with these rioters. And that could lead potentially to the expulsion of a member if we have strong evidence that that happened. But expulsion is obviously a much stiffer penalty, and it's not something that I think we can just do overnight. I think you have to give that member due process and the right to respond and to present evidence. And I believe we will examine it, but I think we can take our time to do that. Meanwhile, we can start with the far simpler measure that I have proposed and that I think the House will adopt in the next couple of weeks.
That makes lots of sense. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gordon.
Hi, this is Rick DePino.
Yes,
can you hear me?
Questioner, we can hear you.
Okay, I had two questions. The first one is, how can we speed this process to impeachment? Using the president's words, warp speed like a rocket ship. My question really is, why not move in parallel, knowing that Pence is unlikely in the 25th Amendment, given the resignations from the cabinet, is really problematic? How can we proceed like a rocket ship, given that time is of the essence? And then I'll follow up with a second question.
Sure. I think we are proceeding very quickly. My expectation is that we will move to an impeachment resolution in the House tomorrow. Today, we are going to consider a resolution on the 25th Amendment that my very dear friend, Congressman Jamie Raskin, has put forward. I think the judgment was, let's do this one step at a time. Let's put it to Pence that this is something that he should do as vice president under the Constitution. But if he, one would expect, says no, then we would move to the next step within 24 hours. So, okay. So that's the plan right now. Obviously, there's not a lot of time left. The expectation right now is that Mitch McConnell is not taking this up in the Senate over the next few days while he's still majority leader. And so a trial would take place at some point after Vice President Biden's, President-elect Biden's inauguration. But that absolutely could happen. There's precedent for it, not in presidential impeachments, but in other impeachments in the past.
Okay, please don't take your foot off the pedal, and let's let Mitch's reluctance to bring this to the floor or bring this up or call the Senate back be shown a light on. If they can nominate a Supreme Court justice expeditiously, they certainly could have considered this expeditiously, and they're choosing not to, or he's choosing not to.
That's right.
Okay. And then my second question is, I really feel there is a radicalization that has taken place. I mean, it's almost akin to feeling that some people, when I see kids with Trump hats on, it reminds me of ISIS with kids that are warriors or Pol Pot or something crazy from history. And I watch OAN, Newsmax, Breitbart, and I even listen to Bongino and Fox, and I see the differences between, of course, MSNBC, CNN, and other news outlets. And these sources of disinformation are really poisoning our democracy. I feel that there's an inability to even reason with people anymore. And this is friends, neighbors, even family. And even if Trump is imprisoned or is impeached, I don't know how we're going to solve these beliefs, because the lies and the disinformation has been given oxygen and growth. And you talk about social media, and yes, the Social Dilemma movie is great, but it seems like we've uncorked a monster. And how do we get the genie back in the bottle? Or how do we go back to Walter Cronkite telling the news?
Guy's deranged.
Yeah, well, that's the ideal I often refer to. But there was a time in recent history when all of us got our news, our information from basically the same sources. America would gather in front of the television at 7 p.m. and we'd hear the nightly news. And it was objective and fair, and it gave us what was important. And then we would go back to our corners and we'd argue with each other and we'd fight about what should be done about all those facts. And we had our fights, right? But at least we basically agreed on the facts. I don't think there's going back to everybody just watching the newspaper. But I do think, as I mentioned before, we have got to, especially after what just happened, we have got to get the social media companies to change their recipe and stop feeding us, stop sorting and recommending news and information to us based on what's going to trigger our anxieties and fears and hatreds. And remember, this is not a partisan machine. It works for the left as well as for the right. And cable news, look, I go on MSNBC, and I think there are a lot of really great journalists who work for MSNBC, but even MSNBC, when I watch it these days, I'm not hearing a lot of news about what's going on in the world. I'm just hearing people talking about how awful Trump is. Because if you don't like Trump, that's kind of what we want to hear, right? It's what keeps us glued to the screen. There's a lot going on in the world that isn't Donald Trump versus the Democrats. But real news just becomes consumed by this partisan hatred. So on our own side, we also have to, I think, take better care. So that's my starting point. And on the social media, it's not just me saying, "Oh, they've got to do this." I'm going to be sending a letter with hopefully a lot of my fellow members to Zuckerberg in the next few days, telling him there are very specific changes they can make to their algorithm, how they sort, how they recommend news and information, which I know they can make. We're going to be asking them to do that. And if they don't, I have legislation that will expose them to greater liability for the harm that they've caused. So we have very concrete steps in mind over the next week. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the reply. It's really difficult to talk to friends that really believe this was staged and that it was Antifa. And I'm at a loss as to how to even communicate with people anymore. But thank you for your reply.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rick, and thank you, Tom. Our next question comes from John from Highbridge. John, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. How are you today? Hello?
Hi, John. Hey, I hear you.
Oh, good. My thoughts are with Congressman Raskin. He's been having a tough time. He's doing a great job there. And of course, the Sicknick family. I had mentioned to you in a post about changing the name of Fort Hood to Fort Sicknick. to maybe try and put a, get a true patriot on there instead of a stars and bars type thing. But I wanted to, the 25th Amendment, who can we talk to convince Mike Pence that he can immediately change himself from an empty suit to one of the most important vice presidents in history simply by doing the right thing?
We're talking to Mike Pence.
I'd love to talk to him. If you could arrange a meeting, I will do whatever I can to sway him. We've met before. I'm quite loquacious.
He just saw a mob of people marching through Washington, D.C., chanting, hang Mike Pence.
Yeah.
They weren't saying hang Tom Malinowski. They weren't saying, well, some of them wanted Nancy Pelosi's hide, but their hatred of him right now, after he supported Trump 100% of the time for 4 years, but once chose to just basically read what the law dictated that he read, their hatred of him is greater than their hatred of any Democrat. And he's got to reckon with the fact that the president he's loyally served built this movement that wants to kill him. I can't think of a more powerful argument. But at the same time, look, I don't know Mike Pence, but I do know some of my fellow Republicans in the House, and they're caught between competing fears. On the one hand, they are afraid of the righteous anger of mainstream America right now. Their major American companies are cutting off their campaign contributions. Social media is cracking down. I think a lot of mainstream Republicans are just turning their backs on them. On the other hand, many of them have expressed to me and others a very real concern about the safety of their families, because they're getting death threats now, far more than I ever got.
I understand the death threats, but isn't there a moral obligation to stand by doing the right thing, no matter what the cost? If you're not willing to provide that expense, then you're not fit to be a congressperson, in my opinion.
Look, you don't have to convince me.
Yeah.
And by the way, and I really do, I'm always trying to find unity where I can. There were over 40, probably, I think 45, I don't have the count in my head, Republican members of the United States Senate who agreed with that.
Yeah.
Including strong Trump supporters who understood they had to follow the law. They had a constitutional duty. There were dozens in the House who did that, despite these threats, despite the pressure that they're under. And I think that's what gives me hope. I mean, you could look at the glass half empty at the ones who didn't, but what gives me hope is that under all this pressure, physical pressure, not just they might lose an election, somebody might hang them.
Well, just in closing,
the right thing.
If Mitch McConnell would step up, and try and do the right thing for one time in his life, and if he would step up and take the burden on his shoulders and say, this ends here and the Senate is going to move fast as the House to get him out, all of those Congress people would feel the weight lifted, because he would now carry the burden of that ire.
I agree. Well, look, he did the right thing last week. I want to give him credit.
Yeah.
And in the House, we have one Republican leader, Liz Cheney, who is a fierce Republican partisan.
Yes.
She's no shrinking violet. She's very conservative. She is her father's daughter. But she has been absolutely unbending in insisting that we do our duty, that we follow the law, that for better or worse, Biden won the election, and that these people telling lies about that are endangering and disrespecting their own supporters.
Well, and those are the acts that are going to unite us. Let's hope we see more of it. Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you both. And just a reminder, if you do have a question, I see some people with their hands raised. Please ask your question using the chat feature at the bottom of your screen. When submitting your question, please also include what town you are from. We have time for just a few more questions. So let's go to Patience from Washington Township. Patience, can you hear us?
Yes, thank you. My question is around what we can do as citizens to participate in and support our government at this point. Many people are upset but don't seem to have any idea what to do. I've been contacting not only my own senators and congresspeople, but also the ones who either seem to have stood up and done their duty and those who incited riots. Is there anything else you can recommend that we can do to actively participate in a positive way?
I think we have to be having these conversations in our own communities. And sometimes those communities are online, unfortunately, more often than not now because of COVID. But anything that you can do to dial down the anger and passion and just focus people on the need to respect the laws of this country. As I said before, nobody needs to feel any shame over what they are politically. I'm a Democrat. If you're a Republican, I don't care. If you're a conservative, I don't care. I'm not asking you to change who you are. I'm not asking you to agree with me on the policy issues we debate as a country right now. Just let's agree. You don't attack the United States Congress. You don't try to kill police officers. You respect the law. If you win an election, be gracious. If you lose an election, be gracious. Those are simple principles. And whatever our community may be, whether it's a classroom or a social group online or our friends or families, let's just try to focus on that message.
Thank you.
And that's where we get the unity and healing in the end. And look, we just had an election, right? And many people on this call took part in it in one way or another, supporting the candidates that you believed in, volunteering, contacting voters. We had more participation in this election on both sides than in any in my lifetime. And that's really good. You elected a government, you elected a set of institutions that held their ground through this. So feel good about that, feel proud about that.
Thank you for that question. Our next questioner comes from Anne from Roxbury. Anne, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Thank you. Hello, Congressman. I'm glad you're safe. I have a question. Is there a current congressional committee or effort that will support federal and local, which includes state and down, law enforcement agencies to vet their ranks for members who either supported the events last week or are identified as strong supporters of any group that's identified as a hate group by the FBI? Thank you.
Hear, hear. Hear, hear.
Yeah, look, this is an important question. We've already had a couple of members of the Capitol Police dismissed for taking selfies with these rioters, for basically letting them through. And that doesn't take away from the heroism that the vast majority of the officers showed. I feel very strongly about that, but there was also a problem there. And we will meet our responsibility to investigate that and to make sure that anything like that is rooted out.
Why were they unprepared? Why were they
There are issues, I have concerns about the National Guard, and I'm still talking about the federal level here. There's going to be a lot of National Guard troops in Washington around the inauguration, and we need them. But I think the Defense Department has already talked about vetting individually Guard members who take part in inauguration-related security because, you know, all it takes is one person to do something really awful. The FBI and the Department of Homeland Security have all kinds of relationships with state and local law enforcement. Department of Homeland Security has a number of programs that work with local communities and local law enforcement to combat the threat of domestic extremism. One of my achievements in my first 2 years in Congress was to restore funding for those programs that this administration had cut in 2017. So the new president will have the resources to make those efforts more effective and important. In fact, in the last budget, we vastly increased the funding from more than what it was before 2017. And I think the FBI is really awake to this threat. I think they actually were before January 6th. They issued some warnings that were, looks like, ignored. And so whether it's local law enforcement, whether it's the military, whether it's the Guard, whether it's the Capitol Police, overwhelmingly, these are good, patriotic people who sign up, whatever their political views, they sign up to protect the country. But there is a problem that we have to be awake to and do more about. Thank you for raising that.
Thank you.
More funding is not the answer.
Thank you both. Our next questioner comes from Michelle A. Michelle, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
We can hear you as well.
Okay. I just want to know, I'm a Branchburg resident, and Hunterdon County is Trumper Central. And during the campaign, we had Trumpers driving around on Route 31 and around the circle and intimidating people at Wawa. And now that they've been emboldened by what happened at the Capitol building, I wonder what New Jersey police or what the state plans on doing to temper the intimidation or the violence that could happen on Inauguration Day in our own state.
Great question. If you see anybody engaging in any kind of intimidation, please report it to, I would say, the Attorney General's office, down to your local police. Again, this has been a problem for some time, but I think the broader law enforcement community in this country is awake to this after January 6th in ways that it wasn't before. And we've seen a lot of arrests just in the last few days related to what happened in Washington, D.C. So I think there's more of a zero tolerance attitude right now. Obviously, people have a right, again, as I keep stressing, they have a right to support President Trump. They have a right to support Biden. They have a right to vocally express their political views. That's not a problem. But if people start getting confrontational, if they start intimidating their fellow citizens in public places and airports, at ShopRite and shopping malls,
right,
that we just can't have tolerance for. And I think right now law enforcement is very attuned to the fact that there's a fine line between that and escalation to violence.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Our next question comes from Nancy from Westfield. Nancy, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Hi, Tom. As you said, the media makes money by feeding our anger and anxiety, and so keeping us glued to the outlets that confirm our prejudices. I think we need to recognize that we're being manipulated by MSNBC as well as by Fox. And what can we do about this?
I kind of agree with that, and I made this point just a few minutes ago myself. With the cable TV channels, it's not like an algorithm, right? It's not being done automatically by a software program that delivers to each individual user whatever information will keep us enraged, right? So it's more insidious with Facebook and YouTube and Instagram because they've got it down to each individual user, and it's a software program that does this automatically. MSNBC, Fox, these are editorial decisions that are made by journalists. And I think we just need to, communicate this to them. And frankly, that communication needs to come from Democrats. And I haven't done it. So, I mean, I'm talking to you guys about it, but I have not addressed MSNBC directly. And I think you've put me in a mind to consider doing that.
Good point.
I rarely watch it. I rarely watch any of the cable news. I live the news, so I don't watch it every day. But, when I've watched MSNBC, I mean, I may agree with the perspective of a lot of the people there, but it's just all opinion, and it's all, can you believe the latest horrible thing Trump has done? There's almost no foreign news. There's almost no news about the economy, about what's going on in the country and in the world. And I'd like to see that change.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Thank you both. All right, we are going to take one final question. I understand that we did not get everyone's questions during this call. If you still have additional concerns, you are still able to reach out to our office by our contact form that I'm putting in the chat right now. Please feel free to address any concerns or questions you have to our office that way. Our final questioner will be Amitava from Montgomery. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Mr. Malinowski, Tom, thank you for having us having this hour with us and spending time with us. My question is, will there be actual hearings in Congress on why the Capitol Police refused help from other agencies and why the Department of Defense did not take Governor Hogan's call requesting extra support that he apparently took like an hour and a half before they authorized it. And even then the Secretary of Defense didn't come on the line. It was the Secretary of the Army. So do we need to have, I think, congressional hearings on this, open public hearings, and these people need to be held accountable even after they leave office, right? Most of them will be out of work on 21st of January, but I think they need to be brought back for hearings. So that they can be held accountable, whatever censure we want to put on them at that point. I don't know what the options are. But.
Simple answer, yes, there will be hearings. The immediate goal this week is secure the Capitol and the White House in Washington, D.C., make sure that we're safe for the inauguration. But absolutely, there will be hearings, there will be investigations, and accountability will depend on the facts. So stay tuned. I can take one or two more, Narit, I think, if there are more, if not.
Yeah, we have a few more.
Okay.
Let's see. Okay, Amy, are you available? Let's see, Amy.
Are you asking Amy Melick?
No, we have Amy with
sorry.
no last name. So let's go on to a different questioner and I will message her. All right, how about we have...
Wait, I'm Amy.
Oh, Amy, okay, great. Go ahead and ask your question.
I was just trying to figure out how to unmute myself. Yeah, real quick. I hope somebody didn't ask this at the beginning. I missed a little bit in the beginning. Why weren't the rioters arrested while they were still in the Capitol? That was so strange to me. Now they're desperately trying to round them up. 10,000 people spread all over the country. They had them all together. It was unfathomable that they didn't arrest them. But more importantly, going forward on the 17th, when there's going to be another riot planned and inauguration day, I hope that there's different orders are given that rioters should be arrested. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, so why didn't it happen? Because the Capitol Police was overwhelmed. When you've got and it's the mistake for which the chief of the Capitol Police has resigned was that they weren't prepared. They thought, this was just protest activity, and they didn't have the security presence that they needed and the barriers that were needed to keep these people out. But I'm not.
Why did they let them in? Why did they let them in?
Yes, the agents who were, I mean, we know there was one Capitol Police officer who tried to push back, and his head was bashed in with a fire extinguisher.
Well, it seemed like at the end, there were fewer and fewer people. There was definitely an opportunity when there were just fewer people.
No, I understand. And again, I'm not like, I don't think it's fair for me
to second guess them.
Images I've seen on social media to come to a judgment on this, right? We're going to, as I said, we're going to investigate it. We're going to, we're going to examine this with a microscope and give these police officers a chance to tell us what happened from their perspective. But it's not obvious to me that once they were overrun, they could have done something different. I know the order they were given in that moment when they got some reinforcements was get people out.
That was definitely the right thing.
And by the way, we wanted them out so that we could go back and finish the job. Finally, I would say, yes, I know it seems cumbersome to arrest them all around the country, but we know, I think they know who was there. The Capitol is a very well-wired building. If you had a cell phone on your person, you are out of luck because they're going to know you were there. And a lot of these people, they got on social media and they're like, whoa, look, I'm John Taylor from Branchburg, or, I just stormed the Capitol. Thank you, John. So it'll take a little while, but like they're going to feel a lot of heat. They thought they came for a revolution. A lot of those people are going to see jail cells.
And I assume that if anything does happen going forward, they will be sufficiently capable of.
There's no way. Look, seriously, as I said at the beginning, if we'd had on January 6th, the security measures that are now in place, to say nothing of the additional measures that will be put in place prior to the inauguration, not a soul could have gotten anywhere near the Capitol. There were no barriers. There was just nothing to prevent thousands of people from massing on a building that has multiple dozens of windows and doors at the ground level. They're not getting anywhere near the place if they try that again. And a lot of them, again, are being pressed in their hometowns, in their home states. So I'm not as worried about masses of people charging a federal building. But we're very vigilant, and there are other threats that are real. I'm not trying to downplay it either.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. All right, let's take one more question. And this last one comes from Christine from Westfield. Christine, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Okay, thank you for taking my question, and thank you for taking the time to do this. I appreciate all that you've already said about the Capitol Police, certainly in terms of accountability for leadership and for any individual bad actors, but also for the appreciation of the work that the officers did on the ground. I have a family member who serves, so it's a very trying time for them, and knowing that they're rallying to face additional threats while dealing with loss of leadership, loss of one of their own, suicide, mental health issues. Can you speak to any advocating or any opportunity for mental health support, trauma counseling, or anything else that is being done to support these officers going forward?
Yes, so that was one of the first questions we asked, and there is trauma counseling being offered for all of these, every member of the force. I know many of them. I mean, there was one suicide, there were several. I think there may have been some near misses. And one person wrote to me, a former FBI agent, to suggest that that be mandatory, because sometimes folks in law enforcement feel like, well, I don't need that.
Right. Yeah.
And if everybody has to do it, even the ones who will just sit there silently, might at some point feel like, okay, I'm here, I may as well speak up. But the resources are absolutely being provided. And, you know, on top of that, I'm obviously not a mental health counselor, but I've stayed in Washington through this period, and twice now have gone to the Capitol just to walk around and to say thank you to the officers who were there. We want them to know that we're not in any way angry at them. We think that they individually did everything they could. And in some cases, they saved a lot of lives because of decisions that they improvised with far too little support. And so I've spoken to a lot of officers personally. I know a lot of my colleagues have done the same thing. And so we're very cognizant of that part of this going forward.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. And thank you to everyone on this call. I know we had a lot of questions that we were unable to get to, but you are still able to reach out to our office on our contact form, which I am dropping in the chat right now. Additionally, many of you have asked about a recording of this conversation. We will be sending it out to our newsletter subscribers, so please make sure you are subscribed to our newsletter by visiting malinowski.house.gov/contact/newsletter/subscribe. I am also dropping that link into the chat feature right now as well. Again, if you would like a recording of this conversation, please make sure that you are subscribed to our newsletter. And again, thank you to everyone who joined. I am now going to turn it over to Tom for some closing remarks.
Thank you, Noreen. Thanks to everybody for getting on this so quickly. I know that this is an anxious time. We just went through a very traumatic experience, but I still have the sense of optimism that I had on January 5th about where we're going as a country. We're going to have a unified government that is behind a president who I think is a unifying figure in our politics right now. We're going to be looking for pragmatic solutions to problems like the COVID crisis and restarting our economy and rebuilding our infrastructure. We're going to get the Gateway Tunnel for New Jersey. We're going to be caring about the environment. We're going to take the next steps, I hope, in healthcare reform. We have a Senate right now where things are right down the middle. Everything has to be bipartisan, but at least we can get votes on legislation that the American people care about. And this horrible event is not going to derail any of that. All it did, I think, is to unmask the people who don't want to see progress. And that's also in a way constructive, because having unmasked themselves, we can address the threat that they pose. And no one's going to deny it anymore. No one's going to say that's not real. And I think that's better than the alternative. So I am very much looking forward to the next few months. It will be a productive period for the Congress, for the country. We're going to do a lot of good for New Jersey. And I will continue to stay in touch with all of you through forums like this, and look forward to hearing from you in all the ways you know you can reach out to me. So thank you again, and everybody stay safe and stay hopeful.